Oh, hey guys. So today's a very special day. We wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction to what you're about to watch. So this is officially the first ever interview on the Beer Brackets channel, but it's not just any interview. This is with somebody very, very special, at least for us, and hopefully for you too. See, we're drinking our Guinnesses today. So, as we've mentioned on this channel a couple of times, so you might know this already, Alessandro and I met over a pint of Guinness. And so Guinness is kind of very special to us. There's a dear place in our hearts. And we got the chance to sit down and talk to a man named Steve Gilsenan. Now, got my computer out here because he's got a long list of accolades. Just to let everybody know, so he's currently the Guinness Global Head of Quality, former Brewing and Fermentation Manager at the St. James Gate Brewery in Dublin for Guinness, Site Head of Operations for Guinness Ghana Breweries Limited for Diageo, so worked down in Ghana, developing the Guinness brewery down there and spreading the good Guinness word. Quality Director for 13 years, Global Standards and Europe Quality Improvement Manager. He's been around, but more importantly, the fact that we have the opportunity to talk to the current Guinness Global Head of Quality and former Brewing and Fermentation Manager is a bit of a big deal. We had a lot of good questions for him, so we're pretty excited.
As you've heard, Joe went through what Steve has been doing and why he's so important to us. So that leads me to cover more of the, let's call it the emotional aspect of this deal, because he was very cool.
I was trying to be serious, and I was just like, this is the list of accomplishments that I'll read off, but let's get into the emotional aspect.
I noticed that because he was being super serious, and you noticed I was very serious here too, just taking a sip, cheering up for what's about to happen or what you're about to see. Just to put it more on a personal level, when we found out about that, we were freaking out.
Yeah, we were pretty damn excited about it, just because we've never done an interview before, but also it doesn't happen every day to get the opportunity to talk to somebody who's so directly involved with the production and also overseeing of such a global brand, and a brand that we just appreciate and love so much. So this was a big deal for us. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. We think we asked the right questions. We dug deep a little bit. We got some really interesting information. Enjoy it. It starts right now. It's about a 40-minute ride.
Make sure you open your Guinness while you're watching the episode.
Before watching the episode, open your Guinness beer brackets. Crack a Guinness. Maybe halfway through the episode, you got a good half an hour or more. Close your Guinness beer brackets towards the end. Do not forget to close the Guinness beer brackets.
That's the most important thing. Do not forget to close the Guinness beer brackets.
The most important beer brackets there could possibly be. Enjoy it, guys. Cheers.
Cheers. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Hey, everyone, and welcome. This is officially the first ever Beer Brackets interview that we've ever done, which is pretty amazing because we could do a lot worse for our first guest. So we have Mr. Steve Gilsenan with us here today. Steve, welcome. We have our pints of Guinness poured out. So should I say sláinte?
Cheers.
Cheers.
Sláinte.
Thank you so much for joining us. If anybody isn't too familiar with Steve, who he is or his background, it's pretty impressive. So I'll do a quick run through of his accolades here. Currently the Guinness Global Head of Quality for Diageo, former Master Brewer, Craft Brewing, Site Head of Operations for Guinness Ghana Breweries in Africa, which is extremely interesting. Prior to that, Quality Director, so on and so forth. The list of accolades go on and on. Steve, it's an honor for us to have you here with us. We have tons of questions for you. Thank you again so much for joining us. Cheers. I'm going to take a first sip of this.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
I wanted to give you a little bit of background on us, just so you know before we get started. Funny story, Alessandro and I, our viewers, we mentioned this in videos a bunch of times. They probably know this already, but we both met traveling in Dublin.
Yeah.
And we met over a pint of Guinness. We were actually both in Temple Bar, funny enough.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah, so we were both ordering a pint of Guinness, and we started chatting and we're watching a band, and that's kind of how we bonded. So we both had a mutual love of beer, and we bonded over our love of Guinness, specifically in Ireland. We couldn't believe how good it was and how fresh it was on tap. So it's very special to us as beer fans and beer connoisseurs and people who have made a hobby out of reviewing beers and talking about them.
Yeah, I saw that in your video you did on Guinness. You were very praising. Thank you.
So for us, starting off our friendship together and our history with beer together, having a pint of Guinness to be here today talking to you, it's a great honor. So thank you. I think that leads into the first question that we do have, which we were so curious about. And it was the main thing that we both wanted to ask you about. What is a day in the life of a Guinness Head of Quality? Like, I guess things are a little different now because of COVID, but if we say pre-COVID, when you were actually there in person, what was a day like for you?
So my job as head of quality is a global role. So it covers every aspect of the Guinness brand globally. So from almost the raw materials we use, the brewing process we use, to the keg, to the glass, to how the brand looks in advertising, and so on and so forth. Every aspect of the Guinness brand, my role covers. So it started off this morning with actually calls with Korea and about some product launches we're doing over there, and then it moves basically across the world over the whole day. I've time spent working with the team in Africa, time spent working with our team in James's Gate, both the brewery team and the liquid innovation team. So if we have any new products that are coming out under Guinness that we're working on. So the role is massively diverse, and is that it covers the main thing for me, which is unbelievable passion for our beer, for Guinness, which I've had for 20 years working for Guinness and on the Guinness brand. And while I'm in this role now, it's a global role. I spent the previous 5 years in probably my other dream job, which was Master Brewer of St. James's Gate, where I've managed the whole James's Gate end-to-end process. So every part of how Guinness is brewed, from the raw materials the whole way through, was my daily job for 5 years as well. So as a master brewer, as a brewer, to work with the Guinness brand, to work with the most iconic brewery in the world, to work with the most iconic brand for beer anywhere in the world is just it's a dream. It really is a dream job to be able to do that. But that's a day in life of the role, and tomorrow the role will be very different. Tomorrow there'll be something else that we'll need to look at and need to think about. And COVID has meant we've looked not only at what we do at bars, but as you guys have, I've a tap here, but you guys have the cans. There is can draft Guinness, and you've seen a lot of the advertising we've done, and a lot of the Instagram. They're all cans and really cool ways to enjoy our pour and to enjoy Guinness, not necessarily from a traditional pint glass, but different ways people can enjoy Guinness at home at different occasions, and that's all part of the job that I do every day.
Wow, that's amazing. I got to ask you this, because when you hear head of quality, one of the first questions that we both were thinking, how do you quality check Guinness? Because I'm sure there's a lot of talk about that, but how do you do that?
Well, in terms, if we go back to kind of the brewing process, there's hundreds of checks, and they start all the way back long before we brew. They start in the fields. So, like, the magic and the art of brewing is taking a raw material, which is by nature natural. It grows above the ground. We're not buying this off a pharmaceutically produced production line. We're buying a raw material from fields. So the grain is grown in Ireland, and it's subject to today. It's a beautiful sunny day. Tomorrow it could be snowing. It could be raining. I think there's a storm due tonight. Yeah. All our grain sees all these weather conditions. So every year the crop and the harvest are different. So the whole quality process starts in July, where we actually go down to the fields and meet the farmers, meet the agronomists, and actually look at the grain. And then see how the grain is growing, and then try predicting how that grain is going to behave when it gets to the brewery. And that process starts in July, and we get that grain then the following January, when the harvest comes in and it gets malted and arrives to us. But we've worked on how that grain is going to behave. Then once you're in the brewery, there is like what we're so proud of in Guinness, and what everyone expects of Guinness, is total consistency from the beer that you're tasting in Florida, in Ontario, to the beer I'm tasting here, is total consistency. And that's what we're so proud of in Guinness, is the consistency in which we produce our beers and Guinness. And there's the process through our brew house, through our iconic brew house floor, is automated. It's run by a couple of guys on shift, and those guys are monitoring all of the times, all of the temperatures, every step that we've determined that when we assess and predict the grain, how that grain is going to perform through the brewery. So what comes out the other end stays consistent. And we then have hundreds of quality checks from the raw material coming in to the brew through the brew house to the fermentation, which we control by the hour. Tasting the beer then after fermentation, after maturation into our bright beer tank. And then the final quality check at the end of any process is the final taste. Once you've packaged the beer, whether it's in keg, bottle or can, everything is tasted. And then, so there's literally hundreds of checks the whole way through the process. And then to go a step further than that, that puts the beer in the keg. Then to go from the keg to the tap, we have a whole quality program in trade where we look at what we call the 7 C's of quality. So correct temperature, correct gas, clean gas lines, clean glassware, how the counter looks, how like the quality of our displays with our taps, the consistent freshness, to then ultimately the crafted presentation. So we have quality goes from us the whole way, from the field, the whole way to the glass. And there are literally hundreds of checks along the way to make sure that what we have here is consistently the same every single time. And that's what we're so proud of.
That's incredible. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to ask you about that right away, because Guinness, as you mentioned, is such an iconic brand worldwide, and everybody associates a pint of Guinness with being the same way. They expect such a strict consistency with it, like you said.
Yeah.
So we'd imagine that there was such a process going into the quality control, like you said, where it starts with the actual growing of the grains and visiting the farmers to manage that production. It's unbelievable. Yeah,
and that has always been in our history. So even when I can't remember the date, a long time ago, when Guinness started the process of advertising, Guinness as a company was against advertising. It wasn't commonly done, but Guinness said they wanted to start advertising. And there's a line which we have in our archive, where the heads of Guinness at the time said, quality of our advertising must reflect the quality of our beer. And that has gone through as well, how we advertise. And that that line is something we quote to ourselves when we're looking at new ad campaigns and any advertising is all the way back. Our ancestors in the brewery, that's what they said. The quality of the advertising must match the quality of the beer. And the beer quality was always the paramount priority.
You know, I've been to the storehouse a couple of times and done the tour, and that section of the storehouse, I guess you call it, it's a bit of a museum in a sense, where advertising through the ages. I thought that was so interesting and well presented, because Guinness has always had such creative, on-point advertising.
Oh yeah, there's some super ads over the years.
Yeah, I guess maybe shifting gears a little bit. I did a bit of a deep dive on you, and I noticed that aside from working in Ghana for Guinness, there you also spent some time with your family in Trinidad, correct? And sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Because I have a little bit of family lineage going back to Trinidad, so that caught my attention.
Oh wow.
So I was curious just to ask, was that related to your work with Guinness? And if it was or if it wasn't, what did you think of the beer culture, if any, in Trinidad? Because people associate Trinidad with rum mostly. So was there anything interesting that you picked up while you were there? Anything?
Well, Guinness in Trinidad, and it was Guinness I was working with. So I was working with we have 13 breweries around the islands in the Caribbean. And Trinidad was the commercial hub, so I was asked to be based down in Trinidad for a while back. I think it's about 13 years ago now. Yeah. So myself and my now wife, my fiance at the time, the two of us, before we had kids, we moved down there to Trinidad. We were there for Carnival. We were there for the Cricket World Cup. Wow. One of my favorite memories down there is sitting in Jamaica, watching Ireland beat Pakistan in the Cricket World Cup in 2007, and knocking Pakistan out of the World Cup for being a minnow nation in the cricket world. But Trinidad's an amazing place, and you're absolutely right. There is a huge rum culture down there, and we still have a bottle of our favorite rum, which we bought. We still have it in the cardboard packaging. I don't think we'll ever open it from our time there. Wow. But there is such, like, Guinness is a huge brand in Trinidad. I think of in the islands, it's the biggest market for Guinness. It is massively popular across a lot. We brew in Barbados, Bahamas, St. Vincent. We brew in Jamaica. There's a load of markets down there. We brew in Guyana on the South American continent. But Trinidad was the real hub of Guinness, and they have, and their local beers they have there. So we brewed with a partner down there, and the Carib and Stag Lager as well, which were the local lagers. And While rum is big, there is like the bars are thriving. Like, and I don't think I don't think I ever actually went inside a bar. It was just such a culture of standing on the street, meeting people, and that's what I love. And it's funny, at that time when I was working for Guinness, I didn't talk a lot about what I did, because anytime I mentioned I worked for Guinness, my wife would basically be standing silently for the rest of the evening because there was so many questions. So when it was just the two of us there, I would tend to we go to the bars and we'd chat and we'd meet people and we'd find out a little bit about what Guinness meant to people and talk about it, but kind of do it more privately as opposed to saying, hey, I work for Guinness. But and like the passion for Guinness and the passion for beer in the bars was huge. So I think there is a really strong beer culture down there. I think everyone associates the Caribbean with rum, and rum is so big across the Caribbean. That's absolutely for sure. But I enjoyed many beers in all the different islands when I went around.
Your wife's probably been doing a lot of quietly standing beside you over the years as you go on and on about Guinness and different conversations, huh?
Yeah, and that's why I said I wouldn't. A lot of the time, I won't say what I do for a living.
Yeah, opens up a whole can of worms after that.
Yeah.
Well, changing a little bit topic here. Hophouse 13. It's a beer that we absolutely both love, and we just wanted to hear a little bit of where the inspiration for that came from, like, and what you can tell us a little bit about it. Like, what do you think are the elements that make this beer so special and so incredible?
Well, when you were over, were you in the Open Gate Brewery? So we have an experimental brewery in St. James's Gate, which does small batch brewing. And when Hophouse was conceived, we were looking for a lager, but we were looking for a lager with more distinctive taste, more different flavors. And Hophouse as a lager is very distinctive, but like we have our own secret weapon in terms of our brewing, which is our yeast. So even though it's a lager, and this is how Guinness yeast is so diverse, it can produce, depending on its conditions, can produce all these different flavors and ferments in different ways. So Hophouse, when it's a lager, is brewed with Guinness yeast, and so that meant we had some distinctive flavors coming through from it. And then we use non-traditional hops as well, which wouldn't be associated typically with lagers, Galaxy, Mosaic, and Hophouse, which we added in as late hops instead of all adding it in as traditional bittering hops. So we added them into the whirlpool. So we get these very distinctive tropical mango aromas from the from Hophouse 13 as well. But Hophouse has a brand, wow. It took us all by surprise. Like, people just absolutely loved it. Like, we were so excited by it. And when you talk about pride in the brewery, people are so proud of Hophouse. Even in the brewery, because it was everywhere. People absolutely loved it in Ireland, in the UK, abroad. People absolutely loved Hophouse and came to Ireland and tried as well. This is amazing beer. And then and as a brewer, when I started the job as Master Brewer James Gate back in 2015, Hophouse is quite a small brand. So a lot of what my job was over the last 5 years was actually managing the growth of Hophouse. Like, how can we get more capacity out of James's Gate? Like, we need more Hophouse. So then we're predicting in 2 years' time it's going to be here. So how do we get more capacity out of the brewery, with a brewery that was that we weren't going to invest in new tanks. We had the tanks. We just needed to create the flexibility. We started. We had the ale and lager plant, which had never had stout yeast in it before. So then we had a project then, well, okay, well, if we move stout yeast over there, we can now brew more Hophouse, but then let's make sure that the flavor is absolutely consistent, even though we're brewing it in stainless, even though to another brewer it's stainless steel tanks, but they're a different set of tanks. Let's make sure the flavor is absolutely perfect and consistent when we do that. So we've managed the growth of Hophouse over the years. So it's been a great brewing journey, and from a brand which started has 100 litres to a brand. And even when I started, we were brewing, our brew size was 450 hectolitres, and we were doing 2 of those brews a week. To about 18 months ago, we were brewing, when we got all the design done, we were doing 15 650 hectolitre brews a week.
Wow.
As opposed to 2 every 2 weeks. It was just the growth in Hophouse has been unbelievable and really exciting. And it's such an exciting time to be in James's Gate, because we talk about Guinness a lot. We talk about brands like Hophouse, but James's Gate produces over 40 different beers.
Wow.
Some of them are not as regular as others. So, but then we have brands like Smithwick's and Kilkenny and Harp, and then we had a Nitro IPA, we had a Milk Stout that went over to the US, and we had a Rye Pale Ale, and we have our IPA. So there's been all these different brands. So it's been a really exciting time to be in James's Gate, but in particular to see how Hophouse has grown over the last number of years.
You know, I'm not surprised, because Hophouse is probably one of my favorite lagers at this point. I had it for the first time maybe 7-8 years ago, if I had to roughly guess. I don't remember the exact year, but I was in Ireland, and I was actually in a hotel in Drogheda, and I saw it on tap, and I'd never seen it before. And in Canada, I'd never tried anything aside from the stout. And being there, and I saw, that glowing Hophouse 13 tap head on there, and it's, what is that? Guinness makes a lager?
Yeah.
And I had one, and I was blown away. And I mentioned Alessandro a lot, how with my lagers, I really enjoy kind of like a toasted flavor to it. Those extra kind of smoky roasted elements, and which Hophouse has so strong. And like you said, it shares some similar taste elements and flavor elements to Guinness, which explains why, but it's so delicious, and it's one of our favorites. And unfortunately, it's easy to find, but it's a little hard to find in North America.
Oh, yeah. You can get it in Canada. It's available in Canada.
You can. I think a lot of the big grocery store chains will sometimes carry it, but some of the smaller retailers won't, and it's kind of hit or miss a little bit. So if you're looking for it specifically, you kind of have to know where to go and who's carrying it. It doesn't obviously have as massive of a distribution where you find it in every major retailer. So when I do see it, I normally stock up and get a couple of,
very exciting.
The 4 packs of cans, right? I'll get a couple of those and stock up if I see it a little bit. But touching on Hophouse, I'd like to go back to the Guinness Stout a little bit. What do you think is the most crucial aspect in the brewing of Guinness? This is something we were curious about. Is there one thing in the brewing process that stands out, which for you is maybe the thing that makes Guinness so unique, but also the most crucial thing that, if not done perfectly, will completely change the beer?
Well, I suppose the advantage we have and the challenge we have is our roasting process. So a key part of the raw material, 10% of all the grain that goes into Guinness is roasted barley. That roasted barley is roasted by ourselves. So I think we're the only brewery in the world that roasts their own barley. So, which means it's an advantage for us in that we have total quality control over our roast. We roast it at 232 degrees Celsius. And again, we monitor the consistency of the roast and the flavor that it's giving off. And part of our process is to manage the roast to make sure we get the smooth coffee notes and roasted notes that come off our roasted barley, and not the harsher flavors that you can get. And a lot of our process through, particularly in the brew house, is focused on that consistency in the roasting process and consistency in the roast that we add, and making sure that those flavors are consistent, because it's such a key part of the Guinness brand. But then the other challenge for us Guinness brewers is we put our yeast through an awful lot of testing. So stout is a high temperature, 25 degrees Celsius fermentation, which is right on the high end of what yeast likes. So we ferment extremely quickly. So Guinness ferments in just under 3 days, and then we mature for about 3 days as well. So it's brewing-wise, it's quite a fast process. But the yeast is then put under huge pressure then for those 3 days to carry out the fermentation. Then we take it off, and then we need to reuse it very, very quickly. So managing the Guinness yeast through the process and making sure that once we take the yeast off the fermentation, that it goes back in immediately, because our yeast comes off almost tired. You want to get it back into another fermentation quickly. You don't want it to be stored for too long. You have to keep fermenting it. So managing yeast it's like managing a difficult member of your family. It does take constant minding to make sure that you treat it the same way all the time, and what our yeast sees. And that's why I talk about fermentation. We control our fermentation to hours, not days, because it's hour by hour we're monitoring our yeast. So we actually want these almost like 58 to 62 hours. We want the Guinness fermentation finished. We want that yeast off, and we want that yeast repitched as fast as possible, up to a maximum of a couple of days. And then if it's not repitched after a couple of days, we move on to a fresher batch of yeast, and that yeast isn't used. Yeah. So they're the main challenges. But every part of the process, we're focusing on consistency, minute by minute, hour by hour, to make sure we get that level of consistency through the process.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I think we've been drinking here while you're. But can we cheer for you? And I'm
just keep asking, enjoying the Guinness at the same time too. It's
it's so delicious. But talking about that, I had a question about more general about your career. What is the most exciting or the most interesting and rewarding maybe project or brew that you've worked on? If you had to pick one.
I think the most rewarding project there's probably two. I probably talked about one already, which was the growth of Hophouse 13.
Yeah, nice.
That was a really rewarding project to work on, and it was more of a continual project because it wasn't a case that it was we when we scaled up Hophouse 13 and brought it to life in the full scale Brewhouse 4 as opposed to the open gate. It was then the constant kind of evolution of the growth of it. We need to get more capacity. But we need to maintain the quality and the consistency. So that was. But I think over the last 5 years, particularly in James's Gate when I was working there, is seeing all of these different beers come alive. So when we built Brewhouse 4, we built it in 2014, and at the time we were building a centre of excellence in James's Gate. So we were bringing some of the other brands like Smithwick's and Kilkenny and Harp into James's Gate and consolidating the centre of excellence. And we had large volumes of about 15 beers, and that's what James's Gate and Brewhouse 4 was designed to do. Then the beer world changed, and we needed to then look at brands like Hophouse 13, like brewing a rye pale ale, like dry hopping, and to evolve James's Gate was such an energy rush over those 5 years, trying new raw materials, Crohn's, the company who built Brewhouse 4, used to describe us as the world's biggest pilot plant because we were just trying stuff at that scale. To try to innovate new brands, brew with new raw materials. We did a wheat beer. We hadn't brewed with wheat malt in James's Gate in decades, and we're now going to put wheat malt through Brewhouse 4 that had never been designed to do that. So it was so exciting to do it and design recipes and then monitor the plant and hope in one way the plant was actually going to cope with putting wheat malt through our conveyor system and through we've lauter tons instead of mash filters, traditional lauter tons. How are they going to work with the wheat malt? We didn't know. Yeah. So it was hugely exciting. But then it was other projects I worked on to kind of change tack out of James's Gate. When I was in Ghana, we launched a product called Root Extra, which is 50% cassava, local raw material. So we run a lot of projects in Africa where we support local agriculture, local raw materials, and where malt isn't readily available either. And we brewed Root Extra with cassava, which again I hadn't come across anyone who brewed with cassava. And then we projects that make you so proud because then you predict something could happen, and our yeast didn't really like cassava, so then we had to figure out a change in the brewing process to make the yeast down in Ghana actually like cassava and work with cassava. So projects like that as a brewer gives you huge satisfaction. And then when you see it, and then you see it on the shelves, and you had such a big part to play in those beers, makes those projects all the more real and makes you really proud of them.
So that's actually the perfect lead into the next question I wanted to ask you. And this is probably the question I'm most curious about. So obviously Guinness is so iconic when it comes to Ireland worldwide. There are people growing up in Canada. I mean, people celebrate St. Patrick's Day who don't have any Irish heritage whatsoever. And everybody buys up some Guinness and you see the Guinness brand name everywhere. And it's just synonymous with Ireland worldwide. So for you having such an important position within Guinness and for so many years as somebody who's born and raised in Ireland as a real Irishman, this must mean so much to you. I mean, how much pride do you take for that? How much responsibility do you take from having that role and essentially managing what globally is viewed as culturally the iconic symbol of Ireland?
It's a huge source of pride to me, to be honest. I grew up, my father was a publican. My grandmother were publicans. My grandmother on the other side of my family bottled Guinness in their family shop in inner city Dublin. We have, I went through the archive and I found labels date back to my great grandfather and So Guinness has been kind of part of my family. And then when I grew up, in Dublin, my next door neighbour worked in Guinness from the age of 16 till he retired. And he always talked so proudly of working for Guinness. So we always heard Guinness was such an iconic place to work. And then once you step inside the gates, you just feel the history. You're just such an important part of, you feel like you're such an important part of history when you're in there. And to go up into the archive in the Guinness Storehouse and hold, which I've had the privilege to do, hold some of the old recipe books, like signed by Arthur Guinness's son, like still on there, wearing the white gloves, reading the recipe for our West Indies porter, written back in the early 1800s. Like, you feel like you're part of a legacy. You feel like you're part of a brand where you have the rare privilege to work with this brand for however long your career allows you to. And then hopefully you hand it over to someone else, having got to be a part of that history for a short period of time. And also know that, like, and with a brand like Guinness, in 100 years, into long after we're all gone, it'll still be here.
Of course.
And know you're part of that history is very proud. It makes me very proud. But then also from a personal point of view, because I have a travel bug in me, the rare privilege to work for Guinness is get to work in places like Trinidad, like Ghana, like not visit these places on vacation, but actually live in the culture.
Yeah.
You can see, if I show you here, this is like, I had this on my wall in my house in Ghana. It's the local, it means a kwaba. It is the local Ghanaian for welcome. And one of the things I brought home with me when I left Ghana is bring home mementos from different parts of the world that I've got to live in. And Guinness, as a company, I've been very privileged and very lucky to be able to work in these places and to see Guinness around the world. But when you travel around the world, then you see what Guinness means to people. Not only Irish people around the world, Irish people are so proud, and you meet so many experts in Guinness all around the world, and you meet you hear so many great opinions and views, and you have sometimes really challenging conversations about people's views of Guinness. But even like as far away, the furthest point in the world from where I'm standing right now in New Zealand, like people, Kiwis, are so passionate for Guinness. Like when I was down there, I had to go down different bars at 1759, back 13, 14 years ago, and we would toast Arthur. And that's one of my like favorite memories of working for Guinness as well. Is the furthest place in the planet from Ireland, people are toasting an Irishman. Again, it makes you feel very, very proud.
Well, that's it, right? I mean, Guinness is just so iconic and so associated with Ireland. And like I mentioned, here in Canada, where I am, or anywhere else in the world, really, people just associate that brand name with Ireland and Irish culture. And I know firsthand, I've traveled through Ireland many times. I know how proud the Irish people are. So I was so curious to see just how much that meant to you, really, because the brand is so associated with the culture internationally outside of Ireland.
It does, yeah. Oh. And to be honest, we have to remind ourselves, when working in Guinness, like how lucky we are. Like, how lucky was I to walk through Brewhouse 4 every single day for 5 years when I was Master Brewer there, and to get to say that I was Master Brewer of the world's most famous brewery is, you have to remind yourself how lucky you are at times to be able to do these roles and to work with brands like Guinness, because it is such a privilege to be able to work with Guinness and to be able to talk about it. And as I say, my wife said to me, and people listen. People can hang on your every word when you get when they feel like they're getting a bit of inside information into the inner workings of James's Gate and Guinness as a brand.
Exactly. That's why we were so excited to do this.
This is amazing. Well, this is again like perfect lead into the next question, because you mentioned that obviously Guinness has such a long history. And you mentioned that you've been the head brewer for Guinness. Like, is there a special ceremony like when you become head brewer? Like, I mean, you almost become part of this like long tradition, like you're passing along like this, this torch almost.
No, not particularly. Yeah. There would have been a role as that the head brewer of the brewery, and that would have been probably the more senior role, the most senior role in the brewery. Where my role in the brewery was managing the process and managing and predicting the process the whole way through. But we had my boss, the head of production, we had his boss, the head of the whole James's Gate operation from every aspect of it. So My role in day to day, it was managing the process, and there's such a huge team of great people working on shift 24/7, managing the process in James's Gate and at all our breweries around the world. You have guys in there Christmas Day, New Year's Day, St. Patrick's Day. They're there all the time managing that process. So when I was lucky enough to get the role, there's no real ceremony, but what I'm very proud of is my name will be in the archive in 100 years' time. With someone look back at the brewers who've worked in James's Gate, and I will be one of the privileged few who's got to be a master brewer working in St. James's Gate, and that's what means more to me than kind of any ceremony about being a head brewer or of James's Gate. It's kind of those traditions are probably a bit long gone at this stage, but we're all, as I said, we're all part. All the brewers in James's Gate are part of that history.
We were hoping there'd be some kind of secret ceremony where everybody was in robes and you summoned the spirit of Arthur Guinness.
No, unfortunately not. Maybe I'll suggest that.
We had that, clear picture, and so we wanted to ask and figure out.
Perfectly. So we were hoping it was true.
Yeah, well, I suppose the thing the point to make I made is there's such a great team in all these breweries working long hours, and people on call to the shift team. So while the shift team's in there on night shift, there's other people on call. They help each other out. So guys who are off shift are taking calls from guys who are on shift. If there's a beer that a guy hasn't seen through a different part of the process, they all help each other out. So there's such a great kind of camaraderie and family within the breweries as well. That's what makes them great places to work as well.
So one thing I wanted to ask you about, after the first time I've been traveling in Ireland, I heard about the Guinness inspectors. And so I did a little bit of research on this online, and I couldn't find too much information. It seems like Guinness is kind of keeping this under a blanket of secrecy a little bit because there isn't much detail on it. But I'm curious about what you can tell us, because from what I understand, are there actual inspectors that drive around? Do they do spot checks on pubs to make sure that?
Yeah, so we have a quality team. Yeah, we have a quality team. So I mentioned at the start that quality from the process starts in the field, but it doesn't stop at the keg. It goes the whole way through the process. So when we have a quality team who go out and they clean the lines, and we have a whole quality program that I mentioned, looking at glassware and looking at gas and clean lines. Those are the quality inspectors. So these guys are going to the pubs, checking the lines, checking that the beer is fresh, checking that the temperature of the cold room is correct. And we have almost an audit program, and we'll roll that. And bars then, and different markets do it different ways. So the US, for example, they've the perfect pint certification that you can actually get it on the wall. The UK are doing something similar. Ireland, because we have a huge team of people doing this. But we've actually shown when you focus on the quality in the bars, sales improve, because everyone judges a pint of Guinness on the quality of how it looks and how it tastes, and people hold the quality of Guinness so close to them, and that if you have a group of, say, three of us are going out to a bar together, for example, and only one of us is a regular Guinness drinker, that person determines the bar you go to, because if that person says this bar serves great quality, beautiful Guinness, the other two guys go, well, my beer must be great there as well. Yeah. So it's the quality of a bar is determined by the quality of the Guinness. So there is a team of people in the markets focusing on, and even down to New Zealand. When I was down there, we had a team of people who focused on quality from keg to glass to make sure that the pint you get, the drink you get, is consistent. And we have something similar then with Foreign Extra Stout, for example, in the Caribbean and Africa. We have a program around, is it chilled? Is the glassware clean? Did they open the crown in front of you? Was it poured? How was it presented to you? Did you get the bottle as well with it? So there's a craft in the presentation and all of the different variants of Guinness that we have around the world.
This kind of ties into just the consistency of Guinness and how it's known for that. But so is there, because there's a rumor that people can actually lose their ability to serve Guinness for a certain amount of time if there's something on the inspection that they fail, if there's something they're not doing correctly. Is that true?
No, that's probably an over exaggeration. But if one of our quality ambassadors will go into a bar and there's something not right with the temperature, we will intervene. So the central quality team will get a notification that there was an issue, and then we will follow that up. And even like this team are so active, they monitor some of these Instagram accounts that report poor Guinness, if they see them, and they'll actually react to them and go into the bars and see what the issue is. Well, it's usually something we have, like we've narrowed this down to this 7 C's program, and it's usually a couple of things: either the glass washer is not working correctly, or the temperature's not quite right, or the line cleaning isn't quite right. There's always something we can find that will help the bar out, and ultimately, as I say, quality Guinness in these bars drive sales, because everyone will assume that if the quality of the Guinness is good, the quality of all the other products will be good as well.
It's one of those things, right? I remember being in Dublin. I spent a lot of time there, and everybody will tell you where to get the best pint of Guinness, and everybody has a different opinion on it. And so,
and everyone knows, and it is a badge of honor for a lot of bars in terms of the quality of the Guinness that they produce, and it is so important. It is so important because people will make decisions on the basis of what they perceive. So for us, that quality program is a critical part of the process. Also, so talking about the whole process the whole way through, from raw material through how the brewery controls the quality, all the way then from the keg into the glass, and even our bottles and cans, how we making sure they're the right temperature, they serve correctly, the glassware is clean, and so on as well.
Well, I love what you just said there, Steve. Like it's a great concept. Like just follow the pint of Guinness to find the right pub. I love it. It's true.
But it is true.
Yeah.
It's perfect. Well, it's fun. Like you mentioned, bottle and can. That's what I would have asked you next. Like, what are the main differences between talking about the draft, obviously, in can and bottle? Like, are there any?
So in terms of the beer, so the same beer we brew in James's Gate goes into the keg, goes into the bottle, and goes into the can. There's no raw material processing difference. We don't. What a lot of people may not know is we don't bottle and can in St. James's Gate. We keg in St. James's Gate, and then you see the famous road tankers, the Guinness road tankers that we have. That's take Guinness to Belfast, where we have a bottle and canning line, and Runcorn, where we have a bottle and canning line, and then some other smaller co-packers in continental Europe as well. But the beer in those tankers, and take Runcorn as a great example because they keg all of the Guinness for the UK market in Runcorn. We send them one tanker. That tanker could go to the keg plants, the bottling line, or the canning line. It's the same beer.
Okay.
What's different a little bit between them is like the can has the widget in it. So you have the widget that's in there, and the widget, one of the most famous inventions of the 20th century, creates the surge. So did you know that the Guinness won the Queen's Award for Innovation? Wow. And what came behind the widget was the internet and the mobile phone. So voted the greatest invention of the 20th century was the widget, which won the Queen's Award.
Beer wins.
Yeah.
So the widget is in the can, and the widget creates that surge.
Yeah.
The bottle has got the same nitrogen and CO2 in there, but with the way the bottle works, the widget doesn't work in the same way. So you have got the gas in there, but what we do is with the bottle is we encourage you, rather than pour it, is drink it out of the bottle. So keep all the gas in the liquid in the bottle and drink it out of the bottle, because you'll get that mouthfeel as well if you drink it out of the bottle.
That's good.
I think it's actually, I have a bottle here, which is US. I think it actually says drink, enjoy chills straight from the bottle.
See, that explains a lot. We actually did an episode recently. We haven't posted yet, but we recorded where we compare Guinness in the can versus the bottle and talk about the differences. And obviously, it came down to the widget and just the mouthfeel of the beer, which implements so many other amazing things in there.
Yeah.
But we poured it out, and we didn't know that it's recommended to drink it straight out of the bottle.
Yeah, so try it from the bottle.
Yeah. We'll have to follow up on that, Joe.
I think we're going to have to do a follow-up episode on that and drink it straight out of the bottle, because you never.
Yeah.
I'm all about it. It's about drinking Guinness, so I'm in.
100%. So, okay, Steve, I got to ask you. So, for all the years that you've been working through Guinness, there's got to be one story, something from either the brewing process, your time in working there, one story that stands out that you love to tell about your time at Guinness. Is there something that you want?
I suppose, there's so many stories, and we could probably be here all night talking about some stories.
We got time.
But But I think like some of the great memories I have are probably working in Africa, and my year living in Ghana submerged in the Ghanaian culture. So I lived in a place called Kumasi. I didn't live in Accra, the capital city, which is very cosmopolitan. There's expats from all over the world living there. I lived in Kumasi, which is about a 40-minute flight or a 6-hour drive north of Accra. And I was one of the only expats in the whole city of millions of people. It was like a sprawling village. It was kind of low level city, no major high rise buildings or anything like that. But I absolutely loved it there. And you got so immersed in the culture. I was the only expat working in the brewery, other than the odd contractor for capital investment projects that came and went. But the brewery staff were all local Ghanaian. The contracting cleaning company, the catering were all local Ghanaian and me. And it was just such a huge learning experience for me and for my family. I have 3 kids now, but my 2 kids who were born when we lived out there, it was such a learning for them. They still talk about it. But I suppose of that whole time I was there, I did get to meet the Ashanti King, which was probably the greatest thrill of my career, representing Guinness. So the Ashanti region in Ghana, where Kumasi is one of the last monarchies, like the British monarchy and the Danish monarchy and a few others. Yeah. The Ashanti monarchy is one of the last standing official monarchies. And Guinness have always had a very close attachment to the palace, because Guinness originally started in Kumasi and then moved down to the capital city. So that headquarters is down in the capital city, but we still had the main Guinness brewery in Kumasi, or in Kasi, as the area of Kumasi was called, Kaasi. But I was asked to go and meet the Ashanti King and represent Guinness and meet him in his palace, which was a great thrill. I only got to talk to him for a couple of seconds, but as part of a wider ceremony. But it was such a thrill to be able to do that. And even then, when the new local chief of the Kasi region was installed, is how they describe it. Instead of enthroned, it's called installed. So when the new Kasi chief was installed into the Kasi region, where the brewery is, I had to go meet him as well, and again represent the company. So things that you never thought as a brewer you would get to do and get to have as part of your job was just such an amazing experience.
Wow, what a story!
Steve, we've kind of come to the end of our time that we booked you for here, but I just wanted to thank you again for joining us. It's been an absolute honor for 2 guys who love beer and love Guinness. And Guinness has been a huge part of our driving force behind our channel that we have now, and also just our friendship. Essentially, we met behind a Guinness. It's been an honor to talk to you. Thank you again for taking the time. We really, really appreciate it. We'd love to have you back sometime down the line if possible, if that works out that way.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And look, thank you very much for your. For me, it's an honor to be your first interview.
Yeah, exactly.
That you asked for Guinness to feature, which is great. And thank you for your kind words on Guinness on your podcast or on your YouTube channel to date. I've enjoyed watching them. And look, I'd be happy to come back and chat again at some time in the future.
Fantastic.
So thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, Steve. Take care. Cheers.
Cheers. Sláinte.
Sláinte.